last week. So it gave me a nice problem to solve in terms of a massive great monorail. So it was this one. I never got the chance to actually come up with a design solution and implement it within the model. But the way I went about starting my analysis of the site was actually depicting each of the buildings on the site and working out exactly what its carbon footprint was. So I started off with just drawing out a simple plan, identifying what was there originally and then what was there and what was put there afterwards. Identifying what each of the buildings were, their age, who lived there, how many bedrooms, etc. to try and break down the analysis and understand each of its carbon footprint. And then from that it was just a long row of calculations trying to figure out exactly what went into, what each of the building consists of, how much carbon each individual person emits each year, and tallying that all up. And that was my initial direction of trying to work out how to create a zero carbon site, was by working out what it already produces and then going backwards from there in terms of design and then calculating backwards. So the final number I came up with was 497 tonnes of carbon, which is what my site produces. The next step per year. So the next step which I looked at was, in terms of our urban design lectures last year, John presented a really good sustainability lecture about carbon and what trees produce and what it emits out of the air. It looked at air pollution and different ways of minimising the impact it has on an area. So, for example, one tree with a girth of 75 centimetres can take out 0.5 of a kilogram of ozone, takes out a kilogram of sulfur dioxide, and takes out a kilogram of nitrogen dioxide. So by tallying all this up, you can then start to calculate how many trees you can put on the site to then...
CO2?
The CO2, so for a semi-mature tree, it can take out 134th, so it's a fraction, of a person's carbon per year. So if you imagine it needs 134 trees per person to take out their carbon. So it's quite a lot in terms of trying to reduce huge trees. If you had a mature tree, so that tree Jack was on about at the start, that massive tree that now longer doesn't exist, that actually can take out 1/27 of a person's carbon. So just looking at that sort of scenario and trying to work backwards in that manner, that was my initial research and grasp of the direction I wanted to go. The vision that I wanted to go down to was to encourage and enhance biodiversity into the existing city context. I wanted to use swales, which can be seen sort of here, which go down the middle of the road, sort of bypassing the mono track or the monorail, to collect the rainwater or excess rainwater. A design solution which you can sort of see here, this pole. Another fact was that if a tree had wet surfaces, it would emit carbon by 10 times more if it was wet rather than dry leaves. So if I could design something which kept the leaves wet for the majority of the year, even though England's pretty wet anyway, but we've had some droughts during the summer, then hopefully that can combat and then reduce carbon even further.
You said emit, you mean absorb?
Absorb, sorry, yeah. Emitting it from the... so this would be a way of irrigation as well, but also natural cooling, reducing heat island effects, which is will be growing on the site itself. I wanted to look at green walls, so we've got a couple of these going up the sides. So green walls to increase habitat for birds and wildlife, so it gives them a place to basically find food between each of the different houses. So if you can imagine each of these had a green wall, it has basically a journey it can take in order for it to thrive and forage. On the green walls, I wanted to use native plants to England, just because then migratory birds who come here for the summer are used to what is provided for them, and it's not something they have to go looking for elsewhere. A sort of more simple approach, which everyone else has talked about, was increased insulation within the existing buildings using rock wool or sheep fur or something like that, which is a lot more sort of woolly and has a lot more thermal mass. And also a design approach, because some of these buildings down here, with this being south, that has garden space, and what I wanted to do was increase or add in some sort of glass conservatories with a concrete wall behind, so even in the winter when the sun's shining down through the conservatory, that heat is then heating up that concrete wall, which is increasing the thermal mass, and then it's then naturally heated throughout the house, and then it also works the other way around in the summer, where that wall is absorbing all the heat and it's taking heat away from the house inside, so it's keeping it cool. So it works in both ways, but also planting deciduous trees towards the south in the back garden, so in the winter when the leaves fall off it maximises sunlight, and in the summer when it has leaves it casts a shadow. I wanted to use solar panels as well on the rooftops to collect electricity, but also you can also use, they're not solar panels, but I think they're heat panels where you can heat up water on the roof, so then you can use that with inside as well, also then reducing its carbon footprint and the amount of energy it takes to heat up water using conventional boilers.
Can someone who did SPVD give us the correct term? So it's photovoltaic cells and solar thermal tubes? I don't know.
Something like that.
One of you guys?
Mm-hmm.
SPVD, who did that? What are the different types of solar collectors?
Solar water harvesting or something? Yeah.
Evacuated tubes?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so basically,
Yeah.
I wanted to use the solar tubes, we call them, to use for the warm heating inside the house. I wanted the biodiversity and the nature to flourish, to also then inspire the inhabitants that live there. If they can see it growing rather than declining, it gives them a chance to then want to go outside and embrace that, and that then helps the local community and the neighbourhoods to come together, which creates a more safer, enjoyable place for people to visit and also pass through, and it then creates a central journey location where people actually want to be rather than trying to avoid. I think that was basically as far as I got before then.
You could
do any more.
so you haven't been able to do
I've just had time to think rather than actually do.
Yeah, and that shows because you've got lots of ideas, but obviously, but it's not translated into a model. But we've already talked about that.
Yeah, okay.
And, you have illustrated things there.
Yeah, I'll get out of the way.
It's good to make use of the site photos.
Yeah, it's just done on the iPad, so I just wanted to quickly take that image and just give it what I thought it could potentially look like. Maybe just a bit more added detail, conservatories added, etc.
It's interesting what you're doing.
Yeah. I suppose your starting point was crunching numbers.
Yeah.
That's your concept. So, which is a valid place to start. And so I think that if that's what you're going to do, and if you find that, did you enjoy doing that?
Yeah.
Then I think you need to be a bit more specific about it.
Okay.
I think that you should, if this is going to be your kind of methodology for the design, you should know the kind of carbon cost or weight or whatever the right terminology is for everything. And so it becomes this constant balancing act. Like, I'm introducing this, but this is this much carbon, so therefore I've got to remove the carbon somehow, so I'll introduce this. So everything is that's a methodology. It's not the only way to achieve net zero carbon, and I think that we certainly wouldn't encourage everyone to take that approach, because I think Adnan came and said, well, I don't think it's. I think we just need to change our habit. Stop being so consumerist. So So there are different approaches, but if you quite enjoy that, then I think it could be quite fun to explore. And I think that you should maybe analyse one a day in your life, and that every decision that you make, analyse that. I think, what's the carbon footprint of this decision that I've just made?
Yeah.
You know, you'd be like this walking, talking carbon footprint analyser and just say, that coffee takeaway coffee you've just got this much carbon, what are you going to do today to offset that? Yeah, I think it could just be, because when you give a statistic of what do you say, each individual produce, each individual 497 tons of carbon per year, is that what you said?
It was, for the entire site, it was 497 tons of carbon.
The site.
So for that strip of site, that's what that site produced.
But I think for that to have any meaning, you need to give it some context, I think.
Okay.
And compare it maybe to somewhere else in the world where people have more simple lifestyles, and somewhere else in the world where people have more carbon-intensive lifestyles. So I think it's kind of contextualising that to give it more meaning is quite important. Otherwise, it's just a number.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think if you're interested in numbers, then I think we need to be more obsessive about numbers.
Yeah.
I think your design solution shouldn't end with the design, but should end with the numbers that the design generates.
Yeah.
So that people are producing so much carbon because of that. You've worked that out.
Yeah.
Put all this planting here. How much could that absorb?
Yeah.
Or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
So I think there's the design's really important, of course, and that's what
definitely.
we're most interested in. But because you start with sort of slightly OCD number crunching, you end with that, and it becomes a sort of, and you're not going to be able to resolve all the problems. But if you reduce the amount of carbon that's going into the atmosphere because of the way you've horticulturalised the site, then that's something that you need to know what the numeric benefit of that is.
Yeah.
I like the approach.
That was the concept I wanted to try and get to eventually.
Also think about ways of illustrating numbers. Numbers are very abstract.
Yeah.
But if you say, well, it's so many suitcases of carbon, you know, whatever.
Yeah, that's contextualising it. That's what I mean, because I remember Toby when he presented right at the beginning of the year when you guys were choosing your studios. I think Toby said how much carbon all Brooks trips created. Do you remember that?
And the flying.
Exactly, and he made you visualise it. And so I think it's that type of thing, so that when you're presenting, what you're saying has more meaning.
Okay. Yeah.
And it links into the fact that we're trying to encourage you this week to kind of start thinking about how you present and talk about your ideas, because you need to engage people. We were talking about it, joking about it in the lift. It's kind of like what we're going to call DS1 as a studio. It's like, how do you engage people to talk about this so they don't be like, oh, I'm not interested in the eco stuff. Which you still have people saying, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. It is true though.
Yeah. So I think take it even further, be even more thoughtful about it.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to know the carbon footprint of your shoes next week.
My shoes.
Could do. So something that is, I haven't discussed this with you, Jules, but in the last couple of days, I've discussed the fact that some students have been unwell and what have you. So maybe one of the weeks there isn't a new task. There could be catch up or enhance. So you take something you've done previously, maybe not finished, or something you've done previously that in light of comments. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Can we fit that
possibly.
in?
Can we talk about it later?
Sorry, it's a bit unfair.
But yeah. I've had some similar thoughts, but a bit more like on
More advanced.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you,
Cool.
Merrick.
Thank you very much.
Forward to the next.